nuclear power plant on the east coast of Japan, American software consultant Chris Hope pours himself a fresh cup of coffee. After 21 days in Japan, he's looking forward to getting back home to Idaho. It's a run-of-the-mill day at the plant. 3 of the 6 reactors at the massive complex are shut down for routine maintenance. Units 1, 2, and 3 are operating normally. 2:46 p.m. It happens. What do you remember when the quake struck at 2:46 p.m.? What did you feel? What did you see?
My shock came when I saw my Japanese coworkers, who were pretty bulletproof for these minor quakes. They started diving under desks, and I saw their eyes get real big, and I knew this was not your typical, earthquake.
This is the most powerful earthquake to strike Japan in over 1,000 years. It registers an incredible 9.0 on the Richter scale, unleashing enough energy to power all of the United States for a month. All across Japan, gaping cracks open along fault lines. In Tokyo, the earth shudders violently for 5 minutes. Office workers scramble for cover as their skyscrapers sway back and forth. The impact is so enormous, the Earth starts to spin faster. For Chris Hope, this will be one of the longest days of his life. But in reality, the earthquake will actually shorten March 11th by 1.8 microseconds.
I could feel the sound of the shake in my chest. Dust and debris were coming down, and so I could taste it and was kind of choking on it a little bit. The lights went out. Time seems to slow down for you, and you kind of think, am I going to die here? What happens if this building falls on me? Am I in the best location? And I remember yelling something like, I'm out of here, or let's get out of here. And we ran into the hallway, and of course it's pitch black. The lights are out.
What could you observe from where you were standing about what was going on at the rest of the plant?
I saw the outside of the reactor building, and I saw a big crack open up in that. I could hear what sounded like explosions. I could see the big exhaust smokestacks that were swaying back and forth. I thought for sure those were going to fall over.
The immediate crisis for workers is the loss of electricity. But engineers designed the plant to withstand destructive quakes, planned for the loss of power. The 3 reactors in operation automatically go into scram mode, emergency shutdown. Control rods stop the nuclear chain reaction by sliding between the fuel rods.
When the earthquake happened, the panels light up, sirens are going, alarms are beeping everywhere. To a layman, that would scare the devil out of you.
Lake Barrett knows what it's like inside a nuclear power plant during a crisis. He directed the containment and cleanup effort at 3 Mile Island.
Now, these operators are trained for this, so even though it looks like complete chaos and pandemonium, they are at their stations doing what they need to do.
I knew how redundant a lot of these plants, they got backup systems on top of their backup systems, and so I had no fear.
Despite the crack Chris noticed in the thick steel and concrete containment structure, the plant appears to have survived the earthquake. But another destructive force is bearing down on not just the plant, but a vast stretch of Japan's east coast, a giant tsunami. Up the coast from the Fukushima power plant, supporters of the marine wildlife organization Sea Shepherd are in the town of Otsuchi to monitor fishing practices that threaten porpoises.
We started to feel the earth shake.
We are currently experiencing an earthquake.
It was hard to stand up straight. In a lot of my video, I'm trying to show cars rocking back and forth, but I'm also rocking back and forth. My first instinct wasn't to think that there was a tsunami coming.
But Team leader Scott West knows his group is in a terribly vulnerable spot if a tsunami does hit.
You know what? I think we get out of the center harbor.
Yeah. Scott started shouting, this could be a tsunami, we need to get out of here. It was just kind of mayhem at that point because people were panicking.
I was about halfway through our drive to the hill, the tsunami sirens went off.
You hear the sirens?
The group makes it to high ground just before the massive tsunami strikes.
It was just a matter of minutes, wasn't it?
It was.
Between life and death.
It was.
The tsunami hits hundreds of miles of coastline with incredible fury. Entire towns are wiped off the map. In a matter of minutes, more than 13,000 are killed. Thousands more go missing. 500,000 people lose their homes. The numbers are staggering. From their hilltop perch, Mike and Tara watch helplessly as the tsunami overwhelms the fishing village of Otsuchi.
Look, in the distance.
God, there is a freaking house floating.
This is unreal.
Their close-up view makes the experience deeply personal.
I wonder if there's a person in that house, and then it struck me. There could be, there was a house that was floating by. But I still haven't really processed it because no one teaches you how to deal with that.
The swirling ocean water sweeps away the bits and pieces of countless lives. A thriving town is being reduced to little more than a debris field right before their eyes.
I was thinking to myself, am I really witnessing a town disappear right now?
There's fires everywhere. The whole town is underwater.
The tsunami is an unstoppable force and is now closing in on the Fukushima nuclear power plant and Chris Hope.
I could hear over the loudspeaker that there was a tsunami warning, a large one. And I looked over and saw the look on these people, terrified.
Chris joins roughly 750 workers who flee the plant for higher ground, leaving only essential workers behind. They have no idea of the size of the tsunami to come.
What happened once the tsunami hit?
It was much larger than it was anticipated. The design basis that the engineers built the plant to could have withstood a wave 3 houses high. But the actual wave that hit them was 4 houses high and flooded many of the areas where emergency equipment is located.
The 750 workers who fled the plant are now safely on high ground. They are the lucky ones. A few are unaccounted for.
And they started taking roll call. And I remember looking over, and one of my coworkers was trying to write our names, and his hand was shaking so badly that he couldn't do it and actually pass it off to another guy.
A huge wall of water swamps the emergency diesel generators and renders them useless. Seawater is flooding electrical systems. These before and after satellite images show the extent of the damage. The ability to manage the crisis is now in serious jeopardy.
Once the tsunami took out all the diesel generators and they got an understanding of how immense this natural phenomenon was, I'm sure their adrenaline levels went up a lot.
The crisis in the control room becomes more urgent as many control panels are knocked out and telephone service to the outside world is lost. The Fukushima plant, one of the world's largest nuclear power stations, with the capacity to provide electricity to more than 1 million homes, is now running on batteries.
They know all the red lights come on for all the diesel generators. All the red lights never come on for all the diesel generators, and they knew the battery power lasts only so long.
The batteries are the last line of defense. They are powering the pumps that circulate cool water. Even though the reactors have been shut down, the rods are still at a dangerously high 500 degrees Fahrenheit. If the cooling system shuts down, the rods could overheat and melt down. At 4:36 p.m., control room operators receive terrible news. The cooling system in Unit 1 stops working. The situation is escalating. The government orders an evacuation of people within a 2-mile radius of the plant. Everyone within 6 miles is urged to stay inside. The eyes of the nation and the world are now on the select few inside the plant. It will be up to them to avert a full meltdown and a nuclear nightmare.
Das que são usadas no nosso corpo até as que nos levam ao espaço. Das que tornam nossa vida mais confortável até as que nos torturam. Todas têm os seus segredos. E não só o que fazem, mas também como o fazem. Tudo sobre as máquinas. Novo episódio sexta às 9 no Discovery Channel.
Começou a queima estoque Dia das Mães no Ponto Frio. TV 32 polegadas LED com conversor digital, só 1.299 à vista. É pra economizar de verdade e tudo sem entrada. Notebook Samsung Intel Pentium com Windows 7 grátis multifuncional, só 1.349 à vista. Queima estoque de produtos novos e de saldo. Aproveite. Refrigerador com Frost Free, só 999 à vista. Tem produtos até 70% mais baratos. Guarda-roupa City 6 portas ou box conjugado Simbal, só 299 à vista cada. Queima estoque Dia das Mães no Ponto Frio. São poucos dias.
Numa terra onde os deuses se transformaram em montanhas, os filhos do sol se vestem de ouro. Mortais com mãos de tesouro dançam dias inteiros. Ao longe, uma gigantesca cidade de barro se eleva. Esse lugar existe. Você pode vê-lo, senti-lo. Peru, viva essa lenda.
Indícios, provas obtidas pela observação, isso é o que constitui a ciência. Funciona desse jeito. Vejo um gato entrando numa ponta de um cano. Em seguida, vejo um rato desavisado entrando pela outra ponta. Ouço um guincho, um miado e o som de um abocanhar. Com base no comportamento conhecido de gatos e ratos, posso propor uma teoria sobre o que aconteceu no interior do cano, mesmo sem ter realmente visto. O começo do universo é como o gato dentro do cano. Como aconteceu há bilhões de anos, não podemos precisar com exatidão o ocorrido. Mas podemos usar as pistas, o FCM e a expansão do universo para propor teorias. A gente nunca tem as melhores ideias no escritório. Não acredite no que dizem a você na escola. A teoria que criei naquele dia frio e úmido abalou o mundo da ciência convencional.
O Big Bang de João Magueijo, no Discovery Channel.
Em um mundo onde eles dominam, ele já viajou muito e transformou verdadeiros monstros em anjos. Mas agora, ele enfrenta o maior desafio de todos. César Millan, no Discovery. Ele pode não voar, mas é um herói para muitos. Novos episódios de O Encantador de Cães, quinta às 8, no Discovery Channel.
In Japan, this is the morning after. The destruction from the earthquake and tsunami is appalling. The numbers of dead and missing, heartbreaking. An urgent relief effort is underway, but it's a daunting task. Roads and rails are now twisted ruins. Power and communication lines are down. It's hard to imagine how this part of the world will ever return to normal. The massive Fukushima nuclear power plant that sits on the Pacific coast is now a crippled giant. There is no electricity. Cooling systems have been knocked out. Unit 1 is overheating. Workers put on radiation suits and masks. They must improvise some solution, but with no power, they are literally working in the dark.
Basically, they were dealing with 5 critical things at once. So it is a very traumatic situation. I mean, the pressure is immense on these folks.
In the control room, engineers are devising emergency plans even before they can properly assess the damage to the plant. In the small fishing village of Otsuchi, the damage is painfully obvious.
The air's filled with smoke.
Through an eerie haze hanging above the harbor, Tara Millen and her colleagues from Sea Shepherd are overwhelmed by the scene below.
There's no emotion that can describe it because you're just standing there in complete shock. Like, how could this happen?
As they make their way down the hill, it's clear the only way out will be on foot. Each step takes them closer to the destruction they barely escaped.
This is what our road used to be. Last night it was flooding with water.
Power poles were down, the power lines were live and on the ground. We didn't know if they had power in them, so we traversed over them carefully.
Watch out for the power lines.
It was just complete devastation. Like, cars turned over, the tsunami wall was under the water. It was a huge wall. It was, this thick.
We're currently traversing our way, trying to get out of here. We got past the spot where the road had broken.
The road was literally cut in half, and there was, a waterfall going through it, and it was just completely surreal.
Just 24 hours before, this thriving waterfront was bustling with activity. Now, it's silent and still.
Maybe 1% of the houses were still standing, and the only house that was standing that I could see is where everybody was sleeping that night. It was strange because we were there earlier in the day, and you look in every direction, there's just absolutely nothing.
We hiked all the way up this hill and up and around. Found a community of people. I think this is where they used to live.
They were devastated. You could tell that they were in shock just as much as we were.
Are those what I think they are?
Yep.
Oh my God.
Oh, goodness.
They had these beds laid out, and I didn't realize it when I was looking at them. I thought that's where they slept, but it was their family members who had died that were piled on these beds under blankets. I'd never seen a dead person before, so it hits home to you that we weren't that far from being the same.
Tara is 5,000 miles from home, face to face with a small group of strangers who are in the throes of an unimaginable tragedy. They don't speak English. Tara doesn't speak Japanese. The only thing they share is a common humanity.
What were they able to communicate
Sadness,
to you?
but still love, because, they offered food to us. They made special little rice balls for everybody so they could, eat them. And I mean, it's the generosity I was astounded by.
It is a remarkable moment of grace and dignity. Tara and Mike decide to try to make their way to the inland city of Tono, 27 miles away.
This is it. It's the last we will likely ever see of Otsuchi.
The heartbreak is not limited to Otsuchi. Inside the Fukushima plant, many workers don't know if their families have survived or if their homes are even still standing. It's a horrible burden for those trying to avert a nuclear disaster. The challenge of the task and the spirit of the workers is captured by plant employee Michiko Otsuki. She writes,
"We carried on working to restore the reactors with the realization that this could be certain death. There are many who haven't gotten in touch with their family members."
At Fukushima, the situation inside the plant is deteriorating. The incident is elevated to a level 4 accident. The workers are most concerned about Unit 1, where cooling systems are out and fuel rods are overheating.
Could have severe core damage and a much larger accident.
Conditions inside the 65-foot-tall steel reactor vessel are unstable. Even though the plant isn't operational, fuel is still releasing huge amounts of heat. Normally, fresh water circulates through the vessel to prevent overheating. But without power, the water is heating up, evaporating, and turning to steam. As the water level drops, the rods that encase uranium fuel pellets become exposed. The temperature reaches 2,200 degrees, triggering a chemical reaction in the superheated water. Hydrogen gas is created. The pressure inside the reactor keeps growing.
That chemical reaction is exothermic, which means it adds heat to an already bad situation.
The operators are worried about a full meltdown that could lead to a catastrophic release of highly radioactive material into the environment. To reduce the pressure, they try to vent the steam and hydrogen out of the reactor.
The procedure books weren't helping that much anymore, so now they're trying to use their judgment to best manage a rapidly degrading, dangerous situation.
Somehow, the incredibly volatile hydrogen gas is collecting in the outer building. 3:36 p.m. A massive blast rips through Unit 1. A huge cloud of metal, concrete, and possibly radioactive particles is blown into the sky. The accident is suddenly looking like a full-blown nuclear disaster.
Das que são usadas no nosso corpo até as que nos levam ao espaço. Das que tornam nossa vida mais confortável até as que nos torturam. Todas têm os seus segredos. E não só o que fazem, mas também como o fazem. Tudo sobre as máquinas. Novo episódio sexta às 9 no Discovery Channel.
Acham que é só glamour. Isso é um trabalhão. Às vezes demora 10 horas preparando tudo, aí tem a foto. Eu procuro ter esse contato com a flora e deixar o trabalho para trás, brincar.
Para homens como o Feco, desenvolvemos Care, o único antitranspirante que combina proteção eficaz com um quarto de creme hidratante.
Sensação de conforto, proteção. Eu passo de manhã, o Dove e pronto.
Care, potente contra o suor, suave com a sua pele.
E no mundo onde eles dominam, ele já viajou muito e transformou verdadeiros monstros em anjos. Mas agora, ele enfrenta o maior desafio de todos. César Millan, no Discovery. Ele pode não voar, mas é um herói para muitos. Novos episódios de O Encantador de Cães. Quinta, às 8, no Discovery Channel.
Objetivo: Gerald Ford, especialista em armas a serviço de Saddam Hussein. Missão: ser o primeiro a eliminá-lo. Discovery apresenta a competição entre os serviços de inteligência mais importantes do mundo para encontrar e eliminar Gerald Bull. Guerra de Espiões. Estreia sexta às 11 no Discovery Channel. Assim víamos o amanhã. Assim vemos o amanhã.
O pessimismo não nos ajuda. Em tempo de crise, quem analisa mais sai vencedor. Pânico não é estratégia. A meta é nos tornarmos bons descendentes.
Sobrevivência no futuro. Estreia sexta, 20 de maio às 11 no Discovery Channel. 10 anos de perseguição. 9 meses de planejamento. 40 minutos de execução. Bin Laden, homem morto. Este mês, no Discovery Channel.
The crisis at the Fukushima nuclear facility seems to be spiraling out of control. The focus is on trying to prevent another massive explosion, like the one that blew apart the reactor building in Unit 1.
How dangerous was the explosion?
Well, if you're local to the explosion, it's the debris of the steel falling out of the sky. Huge multi-ton pieces of steel that were thrown up hundreds of meters and it fell down.
Officials from the Japanese utility company TEPCO tell the world that the radiation release from the explosion is modest. But the charred remains of Unit 1 raise fears that the situation is worse than it seems. A full meltdown is a real possibility. To avoid this ultimate nuclear nightmare, and without any fresh water available, engineers make a desperate call. Seawater will be used to cool the reactors. Because there's no power, they bring in fire trucks and will use their pumps to get water into the reactor vessel.
When engineers have to bring a fire truck into a nuclear reactor to cool it down, that is not a good day.
The injection of seawater is basically game over.
Game over, because the salt water will damage critical systems, rendering the plant useless.
Somebody may have told the boss, I'm going to ruin a $5 billion plant here, okay?
Because it causes severe corrosion, right?
Right. So units 1 through 4 will never run again.
The footage of the Unit 1 explosion plays again and again on television and the internet. Tara Millen, Mike Voss, and the team from Sea Shepherd watched the crisis unfold from a hotel. After a harrowing 13-hour walk, they were able to hitch a ride to the city of Tono. They're exhausted and in a state of shock. Now the news of an explosion and the threat of radiation is almost too much to bear.
Were you truly concerned about exposure to radiation?
We certainly were. We said, let's get as far away from this area as we possibly can. Because I didn't realize up until that point that the radiation was that bad until people in Tono were panicking.
At that point, it just didn't seem like reality anymore. Our minds were just, we need to get home and we need to get out of here.
Mike, Tara, and their colleagues find a ride out of Tono. Before long, they'll be on a flight home. At Fukushima, the crisis is developing on multiple fronts. The cooling pump in Unit 3 fails. The water level inside that reactor is dropping, and the pressure is rising. But before they can add water, they must release gas.
The pressure inside the reactor vessel is 1,000 pounds per square inch. The firewater pumps can't develop that much pressure. So there was a need to reduce the pressure in the reactor vessel down to below the point where the pumps could actually send water into the reactor vessel instead of being stuck pumping and deadheading against such high pressure. In order to reduce pressure, there are relief valves on the main steam lines that the workers can open to bleed off some of the pressure, kind of like on an air car tire. You open up the valve, you allow some air to come out of the tire. The workers will open up the relief valves, bleeding off pressure of the reactor vessel down to the point where the makeup pumps could do their thing and inject seawater.
But before workers can even catch their breath, a hydrogen explosion blows out the top of Unit 3. 11 workers are injured. The Fukushima plant is beginning to resemble a war zone.
You could see it evident in television, in all the news conferences, in the voices of the officials, and felt like the worst was yet to come.
Ken Belson is covering the story for the New York Times in Tokyo, where powerful aftershocks show no signs of letting up.
There were 3, 4, 5 a day. Some of them quite large. When you're sitting in your chair, you can't tell whether you've just sort of rolled the wheels on the chair or another earthquake's about to come. And that gets a little disconcerting.
Back at the plant, engineers devise a new plan to vent pressure from Unit 2. It will require an incredibly dangerous mission.
The engineers or plant managers sent operators up into the Unit 2 reactor building, and they took out large 20-foot panels out of the wall.
They improvised it.
They improvised this. They thought out of the box and took that panel out to allow the hydrogen gas to diffuse out of the building.
When they removed the panel, explosive hydrogen gas and steam escape. The procedure is a success. At dawn, yet another explosion rocks the plant. The roof is blown off Unit 4. Around the plant, radiation levels spike. Iodine-131 and cesium-137 are in the air, threatening to penetrate workers' bodies, damage DNA, and cause sickness or cancer.
You don't want to breathe it into your lungs because then you get a dose inside your body. That's why they wear suits and they wear respirators.
Radiation poisoning is on the mind of American software consultant Chris Hope. He was inside the Fukushima complex when the earthquake hit. Now back home in Idaho, he's checked for radiation exposure. Nothing is found, but he's still haunted by what's happening in Japan. The experience has left him shaken and humbled.
I'm kind of reliving those few minutes where I really did feel like I was going to die, you know. To have a near-death experience like that, it's an experience that I'll, you know, take with me the rest of my life.
At the plant, it's an uphill battle. The Japanese Prime Minister appears on television to urge everyone within a 19-mile radius to stay inside and close their windows and doors. Conditions are dangerous. 750 workers evacuate. Only 50 remain to man the pumps bringing seawater into the plant. They become known as the Fukushima 50, and a worried world is watching their every move.
10 anos de perseguição. 9 meses de planejamento. 40 minutos de execução. Bin Laden, homem morto. Este mês, no Discovery Channel. Eles superaram situações que desafiavam a resistência humana. Sobrevivi. Novo episódio terça às 10, no Discovery Channel.
Península, o primeiro bairro privativo do Centro-Oeste e o maior sucesso da cidade, lança a segunda fase. Localizado no ponto mais alto de Águas Claras, Península tem rápido e fácil acesso, um lazer incomparável, muita natureza, segurança para sua família, comércio local e apartamentos que esbanjam conforto e sofisticação. Venha conhecer o novo decorado do mais fantástico 4 quartos de Águas Claras e aproveite as condições de lançamento. More no Península, o melhor da vida acontece aqui.
Planeta humano. Foi uma coisa muito incrível, porque vários tipos de acontecimentos que foram tomados ali pelas câmeras, pelos cineastas e tudo, que é uma coisa que a gente até nem acredita como é que podem fazer tanta coisa assim, né? Alô, meus amigos, eu sou o Milton Nascimento e sou a voz do Planeta Humano. Estreia dia 12 de maio, às 10, no Discovery Channel.
Queremos acreditar que existe uma razão para tudo. Mas há coisas neste mundo que são estranhas. Que parecem desafiar a lógica. Crer ou não crer? Novos episódios quartas, às 10, no Discovery Channel. Estreia quarta às 9, no Discovery Channel. das que são usadas no nosso corpo até as que nos levam ao espaço. Das que tornam nossa vida mais confortável, até as que nos torturam. Todas têm os seus segredos. E não só o que fazem, mas também como o fazem. Tudo sobre as máquinas. Novo episódio sexta às 9, no Discovery Channel.
Eles prometeram estar juntos nos bons e maus momentos, sobretudo nos maus. Atração Perigosa, novo episódio, amanhã às 10 no Discovery Channel.
The Fukushima nuclear power plant, once a marvel of modern technology, now looks like a war zone. Only the Fukushima 50 remain inside. Their mission is to keep fuel rods from overheating and generating gases that could trigger an explosion. They look like a small band of fighters dodging enemy fire. But this enemy is silent and invisible. Workers use Geiger counters and dosimeters to measure the danger.
Each of the workers is carrying a series of dosimeters.
Dr. Robert Gale, an expert on the links between radiation and cancer, has been advising officials in Japan about the current crisis.
Two of the dosimeters that they wear are intended to capture external radiation. And a third kind of dosimeter is intended to try to capture the amount of radiation that's internalized, that you might inhale or might ingest.
The workers appear to be gaining some ground. The pressure in Reactor 2 drops. By 6:15 a.m., a fire in Unit 4 is no longer visible. But the morning ends with a sudden massive spike in radiation. The levels are so high, workers hastily retreat. But as soon as the levels drop, they regroup and return to the plant. Their selfless dedication raises a profound question, one that Ron Fountain can answer from personal experience. As a worker at 3 Mile Island, he stayed at his post as that crisis worsened.
People can question, well, why would somebody risk their life to do it? But who else? They know every inch of their plant, how the systems work. They know exactly what to do and how to go about it.
There are actually hundreds of workers on hand at Fukushima. But because the job is considered so dangerous, only small groups are allowed inside at a time.
Do you think the workers that are being rotated in and out of the Fukushima plant are prepared to die to save the plant?
Oh yes, I think some of them already think they are dying. I mean, that may not be true, but they're ready to do that if that's what it would take.
The commitment is that great.
It is.
Do you consider those workers heroes?
Oh yeah, sure they are.
Japanese Prime Minister Naoto Kan tells the workers, retreat is unthinkable. You are the only ones who can resolve the crisis. Many see the Fukushima workers as modern-day samurai, following the ancient Bushido code of honor, duty, and sacrifice.
You never have a choice. The way you're trained, you're just expected to go in there no matter how dire the circumstance.
It's my understanding from talking to colleagues is almost the reverse. Yes, you have a choice. Nobody has to go and do this, but they had people lined up volunteering to go.
Which is extraordinary.
Yes.
Conditions for the men are incredibly difficult. They sleep wherever they can find space. Food and water are rationed. Radiation is a constant threat. Finally, after almost a week, reinforcements arrive. Members of Japan's self-defense force, as well as policemen and firemen. Fan out with fire trucks and riot control water cannons. The threat from the spent fuel pools remains. The pools are housed inside the reactor buildings, but massive explosions have destroyed that layer of protection. 3 pools are now exposed to the elements and could release radioactivity directly into the atmosphere. From the air, 2 Chinook helicopters began to douse the fuel pool of Unit Number 3 with seawater. The helicopters are retrofitted with lead plates to shield them from radiation. The pilots are also wearing full radiation suits. Sweeping in at high speeds to minimize exposure, the pilots drop their payload of 2,000 gallons of water. Their mission may have another benefit.
They were really trying to scrub those potential isotopes being released from those pools rather than letting them continue to loft into the air.
For plant managers, worker safety is an ongoing concern. As helicopters bombard the plant from above, electricians are sent deep into the basement of Unit 2. They struggle in hellish conditions to run electrical cables. Returning power is critical to stabilizing the plant, but there are radioactive hotspots everywhere.
You have 20 minutes to get this cable from here to there. The thing's ticking how many minutes you have. They'll say you have 10 minutes left, you have 9 minutes left, you have 8 minutes left. And so they were under pressure to get the cable for the next team to come in and pull the cable the rest of the way so that they could get power back to the control room.
All over Japan, things come to a standstill as people observe a moment of silence to honor the dead and missing from the tragedy that struck exactly 1 week ago. In Tokyo, officials raised the status of the nuclear crisis to level 5.
They're literally in combat. The stress levels have to be tremendous.
Fukushima workers are now dealing with an accident on a par with the 1979 Three Mile Island crisis in Pennsylvania. Power is finally restored. The plant at Fukushima has outside electricity for the first time since the earthquake. But in Tokyo, fear is growing. Is the water safe to drink?
10 anos de perseguição. 9 meses de planejamento. 40 minutos de execução. Bin Laden, homem morto. Este mês, no Discovery Channel. Eles superaram situações que desafiavam a resistência humana. Sobrevivi. Novo episódio terça às 10 no Discovery Channel.
Quem entende de carro sabe a importância de um bom desempenho, de muita estabilidade nas curvas, de um câmbio automático com trocas suaves e precisas, um interior silencioso e muito confortável, um freio com assistência de frenagem de emergência. E às vezes quem entende de carro entende mais de carro mesmo, né? Chevrolet Malibu, por apenas R$ 79.900.
Se você busca um relacionamento verdadeiro, seu lugar é a eHarmony. Somos responsáveis pelo casamento de, em média, 542 pessoas por dia nos Estados Unidos. Vamos além das fotos e dos perfis. A eHarmony te indica pessoas compatíveis nas mais profundas dimensões. Cadastre-se gratuitamente, receba seu estudo de personalidade e conheça quem realmente combina com você. Acesse www.eharmony.com.br.
Em um mundo onde eles dominam, ele já viajou muito e transformou verdadeiros monstros em anjos. Mas agora, ele enfrenta o maior desafio de todos. César Millan, no Discovery. Ele pode não voar, mas é um herói para muitos. Novos episódios de O Encantador de Cães. Quinta, às 8, no Discovery Channel.
Objetivo: Gerador, especialista em armas a serviço de Saddam Hussein. Missão: ser o primeiro a eliminá-lo. Discovery apresenta a competição entre os serviços de inteligência mais importantes do mundo para encontrar e eliminar Gerald Bull. Guerra de Espiões. Estreia sexta às 11 no Discovery Channel. Assim víamos o amanhã. Assim vemos o amanhã.
O pessimismo não nos ajuda. Em tempo de crise, quem analisa mais sai vencedor. Pânico não é estratégia. A meta é nos tornarmos bons descendentes.
Sobrevivência no Futuro. Estreia sexta, 20 de maio às 11 no Discovery Channel. Você é fascinado por elas e quer saber como funcionam? Descubrem tudo sobre as máquinas. Novo episódio sexta às 9 no Discovery Channel.
The crisis hits home for the 13 million people of Tokyo. After multiple blasts at the Fukushima plant, helpful winds carried most of the radiation out to sea. But a change in the weather now sends radioactive particles 150 miles in the opposite direction, straight towards the capital. Experts believe rainfall is dumping the cancer-causing agent iodine-131 into reservoirs that supply water to the city. Officials announced that drinking water contains twice the legal limit set for infants. The announcement triggers a rush to stores and a run on supplies throughout the city.
It's hard to buy a bottle of water in the store anymore because people have panicked.
But some experts say the response is out of sync with reality, that the level of radiation is not posing a serious threat to anyone's health.
The issue is, what do these action levels mean? Can you drink that glass of water? Yeah. Can you drink 100 glasses of water like that? Absolutely. Your risk is not going to be any greater than if you take a transcontinental airplane flight.
Officials in Tokyo announce that radiation levels have dropped and the water is once again safe to drink for everyone. But the news seems to have little impact. A sense of fear and betrayal is growing. What's safe to eat? Is it really safe to drink the water?
My wife is pregnant now, so we're very worried.
I'm afraid we'll all end up with radiation poisoning. I wish the government would take clearer steps to deal with the problem.
At Fukushima, the battle to cool the reactors continues. It's been a frustrating process. One step forward, 2 steps back. Progress followed by complications. And now, one of those complications is seriously hindering operations. The massive amount of water being sprayed and pumped into the plant has nowhere to go. Radioactive water is spreading everywhere, but managers still send a team of electricians into a flooded section of Unit 3 in an effort to rewire control panels needed to activate pumps essential for normal cooling operations.
They are working in basement, so it's pitch black. It's wet. They're on stopwatches. They know they can only be there so many minutes.
12:10 p.m. The water the electricians are slogging through turns out to be much more contaminated than expected. 2 workers suffer radiation burns. They're evacuated to the hospital. The incident is alarming. So are new readings throughout the plant. The water in the basement of Unit 2 is blistering. It's more than 100,000 times higher than normal. The news sends shockwaves through the operation. Engineers suspect the problem might be in the reactor cores themselves. If they've been breached and are leaking, it would be terrible news. And as more earthquakes and aftershocks hit the region, Unit 2 appears to be especially vulnerable.
One of the consequences of the feed and bleed mode is the more and more water you put into a containment structure that's receiving aftershocks and smaller earthquakes increases the chance that the structure fails or collapses due to all that additional weight.
Another setback. An 8-inch crack is discovered in a concrete trench near reactor number 2. Highly radioactive water is pouring directly into the ocean.
Anything that missed the spent fuel pools or overflowed the spent fuel pools made its way back into the basement of the reactor building, and apparently some of it also got into the turbine building, which caused some problems.
Workers attempt to plug the leak. Filling the trench with cement doesn't work. Neither does a polymer of sawdust and shredded paper. Finally, the leak is plugged successfully by injecting liquid glass directly into the bedrock beneath the trench. It's 3.5 weeks into the crisis, and workers are waging battles on 2 major fronts. They're pumping water into the spent fuel pools and trying to figure out what to do with the radioactive water that's flooding the plant and crippling efforts to reconnect the cooling system. A decision is made to pump more than 11,000 tons of radioactive water directly into the sea. Despite reassurances from TEPCO officials, the maneuver is one more blow to an already nervous public. More than 200,000 have already been displaced. Now there are calls to expand the evacuation zone beyond 19 miles. People are beginning to wonder if things will ever return to normal at Fukushima.
Objetivo: gerador, especialista em armas a serviço de Saddam Hussein. Missão: ser o primeiro a eliminá-lo. Discovery apresenta a competição entre os serviços de inteligência mais importantes do mundo para encontrar e eliminar Gerald Bull. Guerra de Espiões. Estreia sexta às 11 no Discovery Channel.
Budapeste. Às margens do rio Danúbio, a capital da Hungria é uma cidade ladeada por bosques, o que transforma o jogging num esporte de aventura. Durante a época do cio, o javali é um adversário à altura. Os bosques ao redor de Budapeste, Berlim e Viena estão cheios deles.
Queremos acreditar que existe uma razão para tudo. Mas há coisas neste mundo que são estranhas. Que parecem desafiar a lógica. Crer ou não crer? Novos episódios quartas, às 10, no Discovery Channel.
For the crews at Fukushima, the work has been grueling. But now, after a full month of hand-to-hand combat, reinforcements arrive that will help the containment effort and the exhausted workers. It is heavy equipment, bulldozers, trucks, shovels. But these are remotely operated vehicles, unmanned robots that can be controlled from a safe distance.
They're using robotics or remote-controlled vehicles to push some of the debris out of the way that's very radioactive, that's near the buildings where it's blocking their access to key functions.
The debris is a humbling legacy for what had been one of Japan's most important power plants. The high-tech robotic operation is not limited to the ground. 3:59 in the afternoon, an unmanned drone takes flight. Without having to worry about a pilot's exposure to radiation, the drone can hover over the site for extended periods, collecting critical data and capturing images of the reactor. The assessment from officials in Tokyo is sobering. They acknowledge what many have feared all along. There has been a widespread release of radioactive material extending far beyond the borders of Japan. The situation at Fukushima is officially raised to a level 7 major accident, the highest disaster rating for nuclear power plants. Despite suspicions of partial meltdowns in the 3 reactors that were operating when the disaster struck, pressure in those cores now seems under control. No one is declaring victory, but after 33 harrowing days, it appears that the workers have at least achieved something of a stalemate.
What has most impressed you about what you've heard, about what those workers have been up against and what they've been willing to do?
What's impressed me the most is the length of time they've been dealing with this, and it hasn't changed much.
Control will be regained over the core cooling and the spent fuel pool cooling. I'm not sure whether that will be this week, next month, or next quarter, but at some point that's going to happen. Then we can shift from a crisis management mode into a recovery mode.
It's been 25 years since the Chernobyl accident, and there is still a 1,600 square mile exclusion zone surrounding that plant. What will the recovery look like in Fukushima? Will fishermen ever return to reap the bounty of the sea? How long will farmland be abandoned? What will the disaster mean for people whose way of life has been tied to this land for generations?
They've probably, in many cases, lived in those towns and in those prefectures in their entire life. To be resettled in suburban Tokyo or Osaka or somewhere else must be incredibly disruptive and sad.
Even though it sits in an earthquake zone right on the ocean, the Fukushima plant was not built in defiance of Mother Nature. Designers were confident the plant would withstand earthquakes and tsunamis. Many nuclear plants in the United States are also located near earthquake fault lines or along the coast. 23 American plants use the same containment system that failed at Fukushima. Are American nuclear plants vulnerable?
I think one of the lessons learned from Fukushima is that the scope of the disaster could be so large that it may overwhelm our emergency response capabilities as it did in Japan.
Around the world, there are more than 400 plants in operation. Can we really plan for every contingency? Is it possible to guarantee the safety of nuclear power? The future may be beyond our vision. The question remains if it's beyond our control.
I don't know what the world is going to do following Fukushima, and none of us will know till months go by or years go by.
No one knows when the crisis inside the plant will end, nor what the tragedy will mean for the future of the people who call Fukushima home. In America, about a third of our population lives within 50 miles of a nuclear power plant. Around 20 million people live near the Indian Point plant behind me. In the wake of the accident in Japan, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission was ordered to look at every plant in the U.S. to see how safe they would be in an earthquake or other disaster. I'm Paula Zahn. Thanks for joining us.
Vivemos em um mundo de maravilhas. Um lugar de beleza e complexidade extraordinárias. Temos oceanos imensos e um clima incrível. Montanhas gigantescas e paisagens de tirar